My daughter-in-law's family pushed my daughter into the icy lake as a joke. She hit her head on a rock and nearly drowned. As I screamed for help in desperation from the shore, they just laughed. "Stop the drama, she can swim," they shouted. And then they drove away. As the ambulance crew loaded her up, I called my older brother and whispered, "They're heading home now. Do what you do best." Before we begin, if you enjoy stories like this, please subscribe to this channel, Clara Stories, and like this video. Write in the comments what country you are watching us from. I'm very curious to know. Enjoy listening. The start of the story. The air that day at the Bennett's Lake House on Lake Tahoe smelled of pine needles and fear. To everyone else, it probably just smelled of pine and the smoke from the grill that had long since cooled. But I always caught that second bitter undertone. I sat on a wicker chair on the porch, a little separate from the big table, and watched my daughter, Sophia. She moved around pouring aged scotch for her husband, Marcus, and his father, Leonard, and laughing at their clumsy jokes. Her laughter sounded too bright, too strained, like that of a child terrified of punishment, trying desperately to prove she was good. My heart tightened with that laughter. Even after all these years, she was still trying to win their affection, the affection of people incapable of loving anyone but themselves. Their country estate matched their status. A huge, soulless house of dark wood with massive picture windows that stared out at Lake Tahoe like cold, vacant eyes. The lawn was flawless. Not a single dandelion was allowed to grow. Everything was too perfect, too calculated, devoid of any warmth. Even the sun seemed different here. Its rays didn't warm, they just highlighted the glossy sheen of the water and the cold gleam of the expensive cars by the gate. I only came here for Sophia. Every time she would talk me into it. "Mom, please come. They want to see the whole family. It's important to them." I knew in my heart it was important to her. She wanted to believe she had a real strong family. But looking at Leonard's self-satisfied face and Marcus's perpetually mocking eyes, all I saw was a beautiful facade hiding rot. Leonard and Marcus had been drinking heavily. Their forced merriment gave way to uninhibited aggression. They talked loudly, gesticulated wildly, and every movement they made radiated a feeling of absolute impunity. They were the masters of this place, the masters of their lives, and Sophia was just another beautiful object in their collection. "Why is our little city girl Sophia all bundled up?" Leonard thundered, fixing Sophia with a heavy stare. She was wearing a thick autumn jacket and jeans. The day was cool, and a sharp wind blew off the lake. "Afraid of catching a cold, softie?" Sophia snarled nervously. "It's just windy, Mr. Leonard." "Windy," Marcus scoffed, mimicking his father. "Back in my day, girls were swimming in October, and it did them good. They were tough. This is a greenhouse generation." I felt a cold dread settling inside me. I didn't like this conversation. It was like sharpening a knife, slow, methodical, full of anticipation. "Leave her alone," I said softly, but loud enough for them to hear. My voice sounded foreign on that porch, like the squeak of an old floorboard in a new house. Marcus turned to me, a malicious spark flashing in his eyes. He hated it when I interfered. He thought I was just a crazy old woman fussing over her daughter. "Victoria Reed, don't worry. We're just having some fun, right, honey?" He winked at my daughter. Sophia nodded, forcing another smile. "Of course, Mom, everything is fine." But it wasn't fine. I saw Marcus and his father exchange a look. It was their special look. Predatory. Conspiratorial. It was how wolves look at a sheep before they attack. "Well, let's test how tough you are," Leonard suddenly declared. Rising from the table, his massive frame cast a long shadow. "Marcus, help me. We'll escort Sophia down to the water for a little dip." "What are you doing?" I stood up too, my heartbeat fast, like a trapped bird. "Leonard, stop it. This isn't funny." But they didn't hear me anymore. They were air to me, an annoying buzz.
They hauled her to the very end of the pier,
which jutted out over the dark, icy water. The lake looked black and bottomless. "Go on, city girl. Show us what you've got," Marcus snarled. "No, please don't," Sophia screamed. At that moment, she finally understood. She understood it wasn't a joke. Her voice held genuine horror. I ran towards them, trying to pull Marcus away, but he shoved me roughly aside. I stumbled, nearly falling, and in that instant, with one last smug laugh, they pushed her. It all happened in a blink. My daughter's body, heavy with soaked clothing, vanished beneath the surface with a dull splash. Only dark ripples and a few air bubbles remained. Silence. 1 second, 2, 3. A silence that roared louder in my ears than any scream. Then they burst into loud, booming laughter, as if they had just witnessed a brilliant comedy. "That'll wake her up," Leonard said, wiping tears of laughter from his eyes. But Sophia didn't resurface. I stood frozen, staring at the black water. My own scream was trapped in my throat. Finally, she came up, just for a moment. I saw her pale, distorted face. A thin trail of blood ran down her temple, dark, almost black on her wet skin. Her eyes were empty, unfocused. She didn't scream, didn't thrash. She just stared into nothing. Then her body went limp again and began to sink slowly. That was when I finally screamed. It was an inhuman, animal cry that tore from the depths of my soul. "Help! She's drowning! She hit her head!" Marcus and Leonard stood on the shore, unmoving. "Oh, come on, Victoria Reed." Marcus waved casually. "Stop the drama. She can swim." "And this hysteria," Leonard added, turning toward his black SUV. "She'll climb out on her own. A little cool down won't hurt." They turned and walked to their SUV. I looked at them, unable to believe my eyes. They were simply leaving her there in the icy water. I screamed again, my voice cracking. "Where are you going? Come back! She's dying!" The car door slammed shut. The engine roared to life. Marcus stuck his head out the window and, still grinning, yelled, "Don't ruin our evening, mother-in-law. See you at home." And they sped away. The crunch of gravel under the tires, the distant hum of the engine, and then silence. Only the lapping of the water and my desperate, helpless scream, dying in the cold evening air above the black, indifferent lake. I stared at the water, and the scream froze in my throat. It turned into an icy knot that pressed down on my lungs, making it hard to breathe. The world narrowed to that dark spot on the lake surface and the spreading ripples. The panic that had just been tearing me apart suddenly condensed, solidifying into something else, hard and heavy. It sank to the bottom of my soul, replaced by a shrill, unnatural emptiness. In that emptiness, I heard a distant sound, the putt of a boat motor. I turned my head. Behind the reeds, about 100 yards from the shore, a small inflatable boat was moving slowly. A man in a faded camouflage jacket sat inside. A fisherman. I didn't scream again. I had no voice. I simply raised my hand and pointed to the spot where my daughter had disappeared underwater. The man in the boat didn't understand at first, but then he must have recognized my face. Something about my stillness, my frozen gesture, told him more than any scream could have. He turned the boat sharply. The motor howled, and the boat shot toward the pier, leaving a foamy trail behind it. He was there a minute later. "What happened?" he shouted. His face was weathered and serious. I couldn't answer. I just pointed at the water again. "There, man." I finally managed to nod. He asked no more questions. He cut the engine, grabbed a boat hook, and began peering into the dark depths. I stood there, watching him work. Every movement was precise, deliberate. He knew this lake. He knew what to do. And I, who had lived so many years, who had endured so much, was in that moment as helpless as a newborn kitten. He hooked her jacket with the boat hook. I saw a flash of light fabric underwater. He leaned over the edge, risking falling in himself, and pulled her up with incredible effort.
As he hauled her into the boat, I saw her face, blue, lifeless. In that moment, the ice inside me broke. But it didn't melt. It shattered into 1,000 sharp shards. I pulled out my cell phone. My fingers wouldn't obey, but I forced them to dial 911. 911. Ambulance. I spoke calmly and clearly to the operator, giving the address of the vacation community and directions to the lake. I wasn't crying. My voice sounded strange, mechanical. While the fisherman performed mouth-to-mouth resuscitation in his boat, and I gave instructions to the paramedics from the shore. Images flashed through my mind. Sophia at 5 years old, crying with a scraped knee in my arms. Her as a first grader with giant white ribbons proudly carrying her first bouquet. Her at high school graduation, twirling in her simple but beautiful dress, her eyes shining with joy. And her on her wedding day, looking at Marcus with such hope, such faith, that I desperately wanted to shout, "Don't do it, baby. They will destroy you." But I stayed silent. I stayed silent then, and I stayed silent all these years for her fragile, hard-won happiness. I smiled at these people, shook their hands, sat at their table, and swallowed their poisonous jokes like bitter medicine. I thought that was my sacrifice, a sacrifice for her family. What a fool I was. The ambulance arrived quickly. Medics ran out with a stretcher. They surrounded Sophia, connecting her to monitors and covering her with a rescue blanket. I heard snippets of sentences: pulses, weak, severe hypothermia, head trauma. They worked together, coordinated and fast, like a single mechanism. The fisherman stood nearby, kneading his cap in his hands. He wanted to say something, but I just looked at him and nodded, and he understood. He turned silently and walked back to his boat. I watched the flurry of medics, the flashing lights of the ambulance reflecting in the still water of the lake. And in that moment, I knew the old life was over. The life where I was just a mother-in-law, just a quiet, retired librarian whom no one took seriously. That woman died right there on the pier the moment her daughter went under, laughed at by her own husband. I pulled out my phone again. My fingers no longer trembled with shock. Now they trembled with something else. A cold, pure rage like distilled water, fueled by a decision already made. I scrolled through my address book. Names, names, names. And there he was. A single name. Nathan. I hadn't called that number in over 10 years. Not since he destroyed the career of a very influential man and was practically blacklisted from his own profession. We had fought hard back then. I didn't accept his methods, his obsession, his ruthlessness. And now that was exactly what I needed. I pressed call. It rang for a long time. I was sure he wouldn't answer or had changed his number. But on the fourth ring, his deep, smoky voice came on. Yeah. Who is it? He didn't recognize my number. Nathan, it's me. My voice was quiet, almost a whisper. I didn't want the medics to hear me. This wasn't their conversation. Silence fell on the other end, a long, heavy silence. I could almost physically feel him straighten up, the gears in his brain beginning to turn. He didn't ask what happened. He never wasted time on unnecessary questions. "I'm listening, Victoria," he finally said. I looked at the road where the Bennetts had driven away 10 minutes earlier. They were probably already nearing the city, likely with music playing, laughing, and looking forward to a cozy evening at home. They didn't know yet that their cozy world was already cracking. "They're heading home now," I whispered into the phone. "Do what you do best." I didn't wait for a reply. I just hung up. The decision was made. All bridges were burned. The old rules no longer existed. The medics slammed the ambulance door shut. The siren wailed and the vehicle sped away, carrying my daughter with it. I remained standing on the shore of that black lake in the deepening twilight. And for the first time in many years, I felt no fear, but a strange, terrifying calm. The calm of a person who has just pulled the trigger. I called a cab. It came quickly, an old car that smelled of gasoline and cheap air freshener. The driver, an older mustachioed man, looked at me anxiously in the rearview mirror. I must have looked terrible. My clothes stained with dirt, my face frozen into a gray mask. He tried to start a conversation, asking if everything was okay, but I stayed silent.
all the words had been left behind on the shore. The entire drive to the city hospital, I stared out the window at the passing lights, but I didn't see them. In my head, with cold, detached clarity, a different scene was playing out, a vision of what was happening at the Bennett's house. Right at that moment, I could see it. I could almost see their black SUV driving through the automated gate of their massive fortress-like home. Leonard stepped out first, heavy, authoritarian. Marcus followed behind, still smirking, full of drunken arrogance. They entered their sterile, lifeless foyer, which smelled of expensive cologne and furniture polish. Their footsteps echoed in the silence. They weren't worried. Why should they worry? Sophia was strong, healthy, could swim. She had just been dunked. She was scared. No big deal. And the mother-in-law was always hysterical. She would scream and moan, and then Sophia would come, as always, and fix everything. She would say, "Mom, stop. They didn't mean anything by it. They're just kidding." She had always defended them. Always. I imagined Marcus pouring himself another scotch, tossing ice into the glass. The ice clinked against the glass, just as the last coin in a beggar's pocket might clink. Leonard turned on the massive plasma screen TV, some financial news program, numbers, charts, serious faces. They immersed themselves in their world where everything was measured by money and power. What had happened an hour ago by the lake was just a minor annoyance, a bothersome interlude that was already almost forgotten. They were, after all, above consequences. Then the phone rang. Not a cell phone, but the landline. They kept it for the sake of seriousness. Leonard answered sluggishly, and I heard his face change. Not from horror, no, but from annoyance. Which hospital? ICU? What nonsense. He listened, frowning, his lips pressed into a contemptuous line. Yes, I'm the husband's father. Yes, got it. And he slammed the receiver down. "What the hell?" he said to Marcus. "Your wife is at the hospital. Looks like your mother-in-law really did call the doctors. She must have played the drowning role a little too well." Marcus grimaced as if he had a toothache. This was ruining his evening. It was an inconvenience, a problem that needed solving. And he hated solving problems. He loved creating them. The alcohol had already worn off a bit, leaving a dull headache and a sticky feeling of anger. He picked up his cell phone, found the number for my sweetheart, and called. I was sitting in the icy corridor of the emergency room when her phone vibrated in my jacket pocket. I took it out. The screen lit up with my sweetheart. What cruel irony. I stared at the words for a few seconds, then swiped the screen and held the phone to my ear. "Hello?" Marcus said in his voice. There was no fear or remorse, only tired irritation. "Sweetheart, where are you? What did your mother pull now? They called my dad and scared him." I remained silent. I let him talk. "Sweetheart, are you listening to me? Stop sulking. Come home. Look, we got carried away. It happens." Then I answered. My voice was calm and quiet, like the surface of the lake after they had left. "She is alive." Silence fell on the other end. He hadn't expected to hear me. "Victoria Reed. Where is Sophia? Put her on the phone. Come here, I need to—" "Don't come here," I said, just as quietly, and hung up. I sat on the hard hospital bench, looking at the dingy walls and inhaling the scent of bleach and unfamiliar suffering. An hour passed, then another. The doctor came out, young with tired eyes. He said the condition was serious but stable. Concussion, hypothermia, water in her lungs. But she would live. She would live. Those words brought me no relief. They brought me certainty. The certainty that I was doing everything right. They allowed me to see her for 5 minutes. She lay there, surrounded by cables, pale, tiny, in a huge hospital bed connected to machines that breathed and lived for her. She had a bandage around her head, beneath which a dark red stain was visible. I looked at her and felt nothing but a cold, keen heaviness. The love hadn't disappeared. It had merely receded, giving way to something older and more terrifying. An instinct, the instinct to protect one's young at any cost. When I returned to the corridor, a surprise awaited me. A young nurse called to me. "Miss Reed, you have a delivery." She pointed to a vase containing an arrangement. No, not an arrangement. A huge, monstrous composition of white lilies. Their heavy, sweet smell, the scent of a funeral, filled the entire corridor. A white envelope was tucked between the flowers. I knew who it was from. I walked over and took the envelope. Inside, on expensive embossed paper, one sentence was written in calligraphic script. "My dear, let's not let your mother's theatrics spoil our fun." I read it, then read it again. Not a single muscle moved in my face. I folded the note neatly and put it in my pocket with Sophia's cell phone. This note wasn't an apology. It was a declaration of war. They not only regretted nothing, but they didn't even understand what had happened. They still thought it was a game, a performance staged by me. They still saw themselves as the directors. They didn't know that I had already changed the script. And in my version of this play, entirely different roles were cast for them. I turned to the nurse. "Please throw these away," I said, nodding toward the lilies. "My daughter is allergic to them." The nurse looked at me confused, then at the luxurious flowers, then back at me. Pity and incomprehension mixed in her gaze. She probably thought I was insane with grief. She nodded and walked away, and I was left in the corridor, which without that screaming white spot, now seemed even grayer and more faceless. I spent the night at the hospital on a hard chair outside the ICU door. I didn't sleep. I stared at the white door behind which my daughter was fighting for her life. And I planned. But these weren't the thoughts a mother usually has in such a situation. I didn't pray, didn't cry, didn't replay the events in my mind. I plotted. I knew Nathan was already working. I knew my brother. My short phone call was not just a plea for him, but a signal. A signal he had been waiting for all those years of obscurity without knowing it. Nathan was like a hound dog that had been chained up for too long. In the past, he had been the best investigative journalist in the country. He saw through people, sniffed out lies like a predator smells blood. He knew how to find threads that others wouldn't even dare to pull. But his methods were too harsh, too reckless for the glossy world of major journalism. He didn't play by the rules. He cut open sores without caring who he splattered with the pus. And one day, he touched the wrong man. His career was destroyed. He was fired, lost his press credentials, became an outcast. He retreated underground, scraping by with small freelance jobs, writing under pseudonyms. But he hadn't lost his edge. I knew that, and I also knew where he would start. He wouldn't dig in the present. That was too trivial for him. Arguments, drunken outbursts, family squabbles, that wasn't his level. Nathan always looked for the root, the cause. He would dive into the past of Leonard Bennett. The morning brought the smell of hospital coffee and good news. Sophia was moved to a regular room. She was conscious again. The doctor said it was a miracle. I knew it wasn't a miracle. It was her will to live. My girl had always been a fighter. She had just been fighting on the wrong side for too long. I walked in. Her head was turned to the window. She was very weak, barely speaking. "Mom," she whispered. I took her hand. It was cold. "I'm here, baby. I'm with you." She looked at me, and tears welled up in her eyes. "Did he call Marcus?" I didn't lie to her. "Yes, and he sent flowers." "What did he say?" A faint, dying hope was in her voice. I looked her straight in the eye. "He said I was being dramatic." She didn't answer, just turned back to the window, and a tear slowly ran down her cheek. Just one. In that single tear was more pain and disappointment than in any scream. In that moment, I knew she was starting to see too. The icy lake water had washed away the veil she had worn for years. The phone rang in the afternoon when I had gone out to the hospital park for some fresh air. The number was unknown. "Yes, this is Victoria." Nathan's voice was hoarse and tired. He hadn't slept all night. I knew it by the way he spoke the words as if rolling hot stones in his mouth. "I have something for you." He didn't beat around the bush. He got straight to the point. "I found some old archives 22 years ago. Same lake, a different boat. Leonard Bennett and his business partner at the time, a man named Harold Kane, they went fishing. Only Bennett returned. He claimed Kane was drunk, fell overboard, and hit his head on the propeller. An accident. I listened, and the cold that had settled in me by the lake shore grew denser. The case was closed after a week," Nathan continued. "Too fast for a story like that. I tracked down the detective who handled the case, Detective Sam Dorsey. He's retired now and keeps bees in a quiet rural town in the Sierra foothills. The old man fought me a long time," Nathan said, "but I know how to be persuasive." I knew what he meant. His persuasion could break others too. Dorsey caved. He said he was heavily pressured from above. They brought him an envelope full of cash and a photo of his daughter, a college student, and he signed everything. He said that sin has tormented him his whole life. The picture that was coming together was gruesome, ugly, but terrifyingly logical. "But that's not all," Nathan said. "Kane had a son. He was about 10 years old back then. They had no contact. The father had left the family. I found him. He works now as a simple auto mechanic in Oakland. He hates his father, but he kept some of his things, among them letters. Letters Kane wrote to his sister shortly before his death. In them, he wrote clearly that Leonard Bennett had cheated him out of almost all of his business shares. He intended to go to the district attorney. A week after that letter, he accidentally drowned." I closed my eyes. The vague, unexplained anxiety I had felt all those years near the Bennetts, the worry that everyone, including my own daughter, attributed to my overly anxious nature, wasn't anxiety. It was intuition, a deep animal sense that had screamed at me that monsters were living next to my daughter. I wasn't surprised. I wasn't shocked. I only felt a strange, icy confirmation, as if I had walked through a dark room all my life, bumping into furniture. And now, someone had flipped the light switch, and I saw that the room was full of traps. "What now?" I asked. My voice was perfectly calm. "Now we have leverage," Nathan replied. "They think this is a family dispute. They don't know we're playing a different game." He was right. This was no longer a reaction to their act. It was no longer the revenge of an injured mother. It was an act of restoring justice, the justice that had been sunk with Harold Kane's body in that same lake 22 years ago. I was ready to go all the way. Now I not only had the right, I had the evidence. I hung up and sat on the bench in the hospital park for a long time. The autumn sun shone faintly through the bare branches of the trees. But it didn't warm me. I looked at my hands. They were no longer trembling. They were steady. They were the hands of a person who knew what to do next. The next 2 days passed in the fog of hospital routine. I brought Sophia broth that I made on a small electric burner right in the room, helped her walk to the bathroom, and read Chekhov to her. We barely talked about what happened. Words weren't necessary. Something new, fragile, but genuine developed between us, a silent understanding. She no longer tried to justify them. She simply remained silent, and in her silence was more condemnation than in all my words. Marcus stopped calling. He had evidently decided to starve us out. He was waiting for Sophia to calm down and call him herself, as was always the case after their arguments.
The segment aired once a week, Stories with Aunt Rosie. It was simple, honest, no background music, no drama. Just words, truth, and warmth. People started sending letters, telling me how they listened with their families, how my voice reminded them of someone they'd lost, how it made them feel less alone. One night, I got a message from Noah. "Mom and Emma made me listen," he wrote. "You still sound like home." I smiled for a long time after reading that. Over the next few years, the stories grew beyond the radio. Someone started posting recordings online. Listeners came from places I'd never seen. Oregon, Texas, even overseas. They called me Aunt Rosie, like I belonged to all of them. And in a way, I did. But fame never mattered. What mattered were the quiet moments. A letter from a single dad who said my words helped him talk to his daughter again. A message from a young girl who said she stopped feeling invisible after hearing one of my stories. It reminded me that love, even the quiet kind, travels far. One evening, I was invited to a small event, a community gathering at the local hall. They asked me to speak. I almost said no, but something in me whispered, "Go." When I arrived, the room was full. Faces I didn't know, smiles that felt familiar anyway. They'd placed a chair and a microphone at the front. I sat, heart pounding, and began to talk. Not about success, not about fame, but about love, about children, about what it means to show up when no one else does. When I finished, the room was silent. Then someone began to clap, slow at first, then louder, until everyone was standing. And in that crowd, I saw them, Emma and Noah, sitting in the front row, smiling through tears. Afterwards, they came up to me. Emma hugged me first. "You were amazing," she whispered. Noah nodded. "You finally told the world what we already knew." I laughed through tears. "And what's that?" He said softly, "That you built us, piece by piece." I looked at them, grown, strong, happy, and thought of all the nights I'd whispered stories into the dark, believing no one would ever remember them. But here they were, living proof that love never vanishes. It just changes shape. They stayed the night with me. We cooked dinner, just like old times. Burnt pancakes, laughter spilling through the walls. For a few hours, time folded, and it felt like the world had circled back to where it began. Later, as we sat on the porch watching the stars, Emma said quietly, "You know, Mom listens to your stories every week. She says it feels like forgiveness." I nodded, tears welling again. Maybe that's what stories do. They make peace where words failed. When they left the next morning, Noah turned at the door. "You're famous now, Rosie." I smiled. "No, sweetheart, I'm just heard." He grinned. "Same thing." After they drove off, I sat by the window, notebook open, pen waiting. The words came easy that morning. Love doesn't need permission to exist. It finds the quiet ones, the forgotten ones, the invisible hearts. And if you ever feel small, remember, even babysitters can build empires of love. That story went viral. It reached millions. But what mattered most was a message I got a week later from a listener in Ohio. She wrote, "I never knew my babysitter growing up made such a difference until I heard your story. I called her today after 20 years. She cried. Thank you." That's when I knew. My story wasn't just mine anymore. It belonged to everyone who had ever loved quietly, given everything, and been called just something. Now, years later, my voice lives in places I'll never see. Radio waves, online pages, hearts of strangers. I still sit on the same porch every evening, tea in hand, watching the world soften. People sometimes stop by the bakery turned bookshop. They ask, "Are you Aunt Rosie?" I smile. I suppose I am. They tell me their stories about lost love, about healing, about hope. And I listen, the way I always have. Because maybe that's all I was ever meant to do. Listen, love, remind people they matter. And when I close my eyes at night, I still see that little white house. The laughter echoing down its halls, Emma's curls bouncing as she runs to the swing, Noah's voice calling my name. Sometimes I think of the words that used to hurt. Just the babysitter. But now they don't sting anymore. They sound like a beginning, not an ending. Because being just the babysitter taught me what love really means. Showing up, staying, building something that lasts long after you're gone. And if the world remembers me only for that, I think that's enough. Because in the end, the greatest stories aren't written in books. They're written in hearts. I don't remember the exact day the change began, but I remember the feeling, like a season slowly shifting, a chill leaving the air, sunlight finding new places to rest. The house felt different now. Not louder, not quieter, just warmer. The kids no longer saw me as the babysitter who came and went. They saw me as part of the home. And in some strange way, I had become the missing heartbeat of it. One morning, little Sarah came running into my room, still in her pajamas, hair tangled, eyes sleepy. She climbed onto my bed and whispered, "Rosie, I had a dream you were my grandma." I smiled, but my eyes burned. I pulled her close, and for a moment, I let myself imagine it was true. Because maybe in another life, I was. I cooked breakfast that morning, like I always did. The smell of pancakes filled the kitchen, and when the family came down, they smiled in that soft, quiet way people do when they feel safe. Mrs. Harper said, "Rosie, you spoil us." And I said, "That's my job." But inside, I thought, no, it's my love. The years rolled gently, like pages turning. Birthdays, school plays, scraped knees, broken hearts. Every chapter of their lives, I was there. Not in the spotlight, not in the picture sometimes, but behind the curtain, keeping the lights on. And that was enough. Or at least I told myself it was. But life, it has a way of testing quiet hearts. Mr. Harper got a promotion and they decided to move. Across states, across time zones. The day I'd heard, I smiled and said, "That's wonderful news." But when I got home that night, I sat in my small apartment, hands trembling over the dinner table, whispering, what happens to love when it has nowhere to go? They offered to take me with them, but I could hear the hesitation in their voices, the polite kindness that hides the truth. They were building a new life, and maybe I wasn't part of it anymore. The last night I spent in that house, I tucked the kids in one last time. Ben cried and said, "Who's gonna make my sandwiches?" I laughed, wiping his tears, saying, "You'll learn, sweetheart. Maybe make one for me someday." Sarah hugged me tight and slipped something into my hand. A little paper heart, uneven and pink, with the words written in her shaky 7-year-old handwriting. "You built our home." When they left the next morning, I stood by the porch as the card disappeared down the road. The house felt hollow, like a shell that had lost its soul. I walked through every room, and every corner held a whisper of laughter. Every wall remembered a story. I sat on the couch, took a deep breath, and whispered to myself, "They called me just a babysitter, but I built this family." The days after were quiet, painfully quiet. I tried to fill them with routine, watering the plants, reading old books, but nothing filled the spaces where their voices used to be. Then one afternoon, I got a call. It was Mrs. Harper, her voice soft, almost trembling. "Rosie, I just wanted to say thank you." And before I could reply, she said, "You didn't just raise our kids, Rosie. You raised us too." I cried for a long time that night. Not from sadness alone, but from something deeper. The kind of ache that only comes from having loved fully. That call, It stitched something in me that had been torn for years.
I didn't need to hear their anxious voices. Their agony didn't interest me. In that moment, in this quiet, dusty library, I was absolutely calm. I was simply restoring order in the library, in my life, and in my daughter's world. I knew that soon the last book would find its place on the shelf, and then silence would fall. Real, full, final silence. When the last book from the table found its place on the shelf, I felt a deep weariness, not physical, but spiritual, as if I had finished a very long and difficult task. I looked around the quiet, tidied room. Harmony now reigned here. I left the library, pulling the door tightly shut behind me, and returned to the world of hospital smells and muffled sounds. Meanwhile, on the other side of the city, Leonard Bennett's agony reached its peak. He had exhausted all his resources. His calls were no longer connected. His threats only elicited irritation. He understood that his empire, which had seemed eternal and unshakable to him, was only a house of cards, and someone had pulled the most important card from the foundation. Desperation is a poor advisor. It makes smart people do stupid, predictable things, and Leonard, having lost the ability to act subtly, decided to proceed coarsely. He resorted to the last argument he had left: violence. He called the head of his security detail, a sullen man with a heavy jaw and vacant eyes, a former Special Forces soldier who carried out the dirtiest jobs for him. "I need the address of this journalist, Reed, and I need him to be spoken to very seriously. So seriously that he forgets not only my name, but his own." The man with the heavy jaw nodded silently. For him, it was routine work. Finding the address in this city was not difficult, especially with access to certain databases. An hour later, two inconspicuous, dark cars with no license plates pulled into the courtyard of an old housing project on the outskirts of the city. 4 sturdy men in identical black jackets got out. They entered the stairwell, which smelled of cats and dampness, unhurriedly but purposefully, and climbed to the 7th floor. They went to apartment number 47, a shabby faux leather door, an old, almost antique doorbell. One of them pressed the button. In response, silence. He pressed it again. Still silence. "Enter," the oldest one briefly commanded. They didn't bother with the lock. One of them, the largest, stepped back a few paces, took a running start, and tore the doorframe and all off its hinges with a deafening crash. They stormed inside, but the apartment was empty. It wasn't just empty, it was dead. A thin layer of dust on the old, mismatched furniture, a stack of yellowed newspapers on the kitchen table, a dried-up plant in a pot on the windowsill. It was obvious that no one had lived here for a long time. They had walked into a trap, a simple one, but humiliating precisely because of its simplicity. While they stared at each other in the gloom of the deserted apartment, my brother Nathan, only a few miles away in a faceless rented hotel room, looked at his laptop screen. A simple blog platform was open on the screen. The text was already entered. The headline glowed in bold, aggressive letters. "Drowned twice in the same lake. The 22-year history of impunity." Below the headline was a dry but devastating text. Facts, data, names, copies of Kane's letters, quotes from a secret interview with the former Detective Dorsey recorded on a voice recorder, the testimony of the fisherman who rescued Sophia, the photo of the bouquet of lilies with the accompanying note, and finally, the report of what happened at the lake 3 days ago. Everything was laid out with cold procedural precision, without emotion, without accusation, just facts. But their totality was more terrifying than any verdict. Nathan looked at the clock. He had been waiting for this moment. He knew they would come for him. He himself had given them this hint through one of his informants. He knew that brute force would be their last desperate move, and he used it. Exactly at the moment Leonard's men broke down the door to his old apartment, thereby demonstrating their methods to the entire neighborhood, Nathan moved the cursor to the publish button. Below the article, an address list was already prepared. Email addresses of all the major news agencies in the country, the editorial offices of all the regional and national TV channels, the official addresses of the district attorney's office, the Department of Justice, the addresses of well-known bloggers and public figures. He took a deep breath, exhaled, and pressed the button. In the next second, he hit send in his email program. That was it. The mechanism was set in motion. The genie was out of the bottle. For the first few minutes, nothing happened. But then, his cell phone, which lay next to him on the table, began to vibrate. First one call, then a second, then it vibrated nonstop. Journalists smelling blood pounced on the prey. The story that Leonard Bennett had so carefully tried to bury didn't just come to light, it exploded. The attempt at physical pressure, the broken down apartment door, all of it became not a refutation, but a confirmation. It turned an investigative report into a crime story. The story instantly went viral. Dozens of websites picked it up. It spread across social media. Within a few hours, the name Bennett went from being a symbol of success and respectability to a synonym for crime and cruelty. Their final desperate attempt to silence the truth only caused the truth to scream loudly, so loud that everyone could hear it. They wanted to put out a spark, but instead they caused a wildfire, and now all that remained for them was to stand and watch the flames consume their world. Nathan turned off the phone and the laptop. He stowed them in his bag, stood up, and went to the window. Outside, a strange, indifferent city bustled. His work was done. Now other forces would take action, larger and slower. The state apparatus, public opinion. He had done what he did best. He had simply told the story, the true story. And the truth, as we know, is sometimes more terrifying than any fiction. A month passed. I stood in the middle of the living room, which until recently was unfamiliar, and now simply empty. The air smelled of cardboard, dust, and departure. Sunbeams falling through the dirty windows drew long streaks on the floor where dust particles danced. The last box was taped shut. I ran my hand over it. On it, in Sophia's shaky handwriting, was written, "Books, handle with care." My daughter sat on the windowsill, hugging her knees. She looked out at the street, at the busy and different life.
In this month, she had changed a lot. Not externally. Externally, she was still the same, slender, fair, with large, serious eyes. But something had disappeared from her gaze. The desperate, ingratiating effort to please everyone was gone. The fear was gone. In its place was a quiet, slightly melancholic wisdom. Sophia had grown up more in this month than in the last 10 years. We worked in silence, a cozy, comforting silence that exists only between very close people. We didn't need words to understand each other. Every movement was full of meaning. Here, I carefully wrapped her favorite mug in newspaper, and she nodded gratefully. Here, she found an old photo of the two of us in the park, and a light, gentle smile appeared on her lips. We weren't just packing things. We were clearing the debris of her former life, carefully separating what was worth keeping from what had to stay here forever. In this month, the world around us had turned upside down. The story published by Nathan had the effect of a bomb. A criminal case was initiated. First one for the attempted murder of Sophia, then after the testimonies of the old detective and Kane's son. The old case from 22 years ago was also reopened. Leonard and Marcus were arrested. Their faces, confused, disbelieving, were shown on all the television channels. Their business empire collapsed. Partners turned away, accounts were frozen. Their world, built on fear and money, crumbled to dust. We didn't follow it closely. We didn't read the news, didn't watch the talk shows discussing their case. We didn't need to. Our war ended the day Nathan pressed the publish button. Everything else was just the consequence. We were only interested in our own small, quiet life. Sophia filed for divorce. It was her decision, made firmly, calmly, without tears or hysteria. Marcus tried to write her long letters from jail, full of remorse and love.
He suddenly remembered how much he loved her, how much he needed her. Sophia read these letters and then silently tore them into small pieces. She no longer believed in words. The icy water of the lake had taught her to believe only in actions. And now the last box was taped shut. The chapter of that life was closed. Sophia jumped off the windowsill and came over to me. She looked around the empty walls, the bare floor. Nothing connected her to this place anymore. "Where are we going now?" she asked. Her voice was quiet, a little uncertain, like that of a person who has wandered in the dark for a long time and suddenly stepped into the light. I silently pulled the keys from my pocket. Old, familiar keys, with a small silver book charm she had given me many years ago. I bought back our old apartment. Remember? The 2-bedroom near the public library. She looked at me and her eyes widened. Surprise flashed across them, then a warm, silent joy. The apartment, small 2 rooms in the old brick building, the creaking hardwood floors, the huge window in her room that looked out onto a quiet green courtyard. That was the place where she grew up, the place where we had been happy. I had sold it when Sophia got married to help them with the down payment on this big empty house. I had regretted it all these years. And now I had our home back. I put the keys in her palm. "We'll have to renovate, but the walls are standing and so are our stories. I think we have an unfinished story there. It's time to write the ending." She squeezed the keys in her hand, and for the first time in a long time, I saw a genuine, sincere smile on her face. Not a forced one, not a strained one, but her own. "Yes, Mom. It's time." We left the apartment without looking back. I closed the door behind us and left the key in the lock. We didn't need it anymore. We walked down the stairs. Outside, a moving truck and my old taxi were waiting. I got behind the wheel. Sophia took the seat next to me.
We drove through the city, illuminated by the evening sun. I looked at the road, and for the first time in many years, I felt no fear of the future. I knew we would make it. My freedom wasn't that my enemies were punished, nor that I was finally believed. My true freedom was sitting next to me now. She was looking out the window at the passing houses, and the evening sky was reflected in her eyes. Freedom is the safety of my child, and the quiet, simple possibility of starting over in the small apartment near the library where unfinished stories and unread books are waiting for their moment. And we had time ahead of us, a whole life to read them all. This concludes the story of Victoria, a story about quiet strength, a mother's love, and justice that sometimes comes not through loud court proceedings, but through a single phone call. This narrative We drove through the city, illuminated by the evening sun. I looked at the road, and for the first time in many years, I felt no fear of the future. I knew we would make it. My freedom wasn't that my enemies were punished, nor that I was finally believed. My true freedom was sitting next to me now. She was looking out the window at the passing houses, and the evening sky was reflected in her eyes. Freedom is the safety of my child, and the quiet, simple possibility of starting over in the small apartment near the library where unfinished stories and unread books are waiting for their moment. And we had time ahead of us, a whole life to read them all. This concludes the story of Victoria, a story about quiet strength, a mother's love and justice that sometimes comes not through loud court proceedings, but through a single phone call. This narrative prompts reflection. Where is the line between revenge and restoring order, between forgiveness and impunity? Victoria didn't scream or plead with the consciences of those who had none. She chose a different path, a cold, calculated one, and as it turned out, the only correct one. What do you think? Did she act correctly? Could she have acted differently, trusting a system that had already failed once? Or is her action the only possible response to absolute evil hiding behind a mask of respectability? This choice is not just a plot twist,
It is a profound moral question to which everyone will likely have their own answer. I would be very interested to know exactly what you think about it. Perhaps you have more questions about the fate of one of the characters, or certain moments in the story particularly piqued your curiosity. What do you think awaits Leonard and Marcus in the future? Can Sophia build a new life free from the shadows of the past? Or perhaps you'd like to share your thoughts